Hi guys from Prague at the Liberty in Your Lifetime conference. This is the real Bitcoin OG, Rahim Taghizadegan. Rahim, you just told in your presentation you were in Bitcoin in the 90s already. How is it possible at all?
Of course, I was kidding a bit, but there are many predecessor projects.
Exactly. So the social history of Bitcoin.
Yes, yes.
You started it. It started in 1990s. How did it start actually?
It started by people looking in two directions, and the one was how digital tools could help bring about human liberty. And that was quite related to the crypto wars, and most thought that that was a big promise in cryptography. And the other approach was like figuring out that the world is becoming more mobile, and maybe you can have choice in jurisdictions. And that happened also that the original idea of Ayn Rand, that there could be a refuge in a world that's going down the drain more or less, seems dystopian. Hopeless even, that there may be refugees somewhere and built somewhere. And that fostered a bit of accumulated in the 90s.
So Galt's, what was the name in?
Galt's Gulch.
Galt's Gulch. And there was this project of trying to create kind of a Galt's Gulch in Peru, I think, right?
Yes, that was one of the early projects. They took out a one-page ad in The Economist at the time, and they thought that they had a high chance of succeeding in setting up a sovereign little territory in Peru. But then the Peruvian president at the time did not agree. So it failed, but it attracted quite some interest, and it made it like a plausible thing for the first time. And I'd say it was in the 90s. And interestingly, from this project, which was called Laissez-faire City, evolved the first really serious efforts in setting up digital tools. So I had learned about the Laissez-faire City thing. And then they were really going just for a kind of digital community aspect. And as I was in a digital community space, we were all looking for how to integrate money into digital communities.
Okay, but before we go there, because for me it sounded like, this somehow, let's say a kernel or like a catalyst, that community that sparkled development of several interesting, let's say, tools or maybe technologies or concepts that we have today. Like, the eBay mafia created several industries later.
Yes.
This project, these 1,000 people, I think, that participated in that early free city project, let's say, that failed. Among them, there were people who created these different tools or concepts. So maybe you can, because you said also the author of the Sovereign Individual. So
yes.
Some name dropping. I mean, what were the names that? Some examples of the name.
Yes,
of the names
two important people. One is James Dale Davidson. He was on this original tour in Latin America. I think it was in '94. And he was inspired by this experience, like scouting for new jurisdictions, and new sovereignty to write The Sovereign Individual, which was a very influential book, not only for the free city space, because he was the first one to really write about sovereign entities and the free city strategy. He was also more or less the first one to write about cryptographic cyber currencies playing an important role in that transformation process. And he referred to Hayek, so of course I knew that trend, so I got to Bitcoin and these ideas for the Austrian School of Economics.
Were you also among these 1,000 people, or you didn't?
No. I did not trust it, and I was right, of course. Many times I haven't been. The other important person was James May Houston, and he was a scammer. But he was a very pioneering scammer, and he had a few concepts he came up with. So I'd say he's one of the inventors of the tokenized synthetic asset idea, that you can take bets and then replace the assets. You just take a bet on the price development, more or less. He did it for lottery tickets, which was considered mail order fraud. So he ended up in prison, and he died in prison even. But he was one of the influential persons who took the idea of free cities and said, no, probably the political risk is high. Let's first try with digital tools and approaches. So he set up this forum thing, and he invested a lot of his own money also in projects. He was also scamming silver investors in a way, but he figured out like there's a need to have scaling effects on storage costs. So you would have like a digital token and someone would store the silver in that case.
Okay.
So he was not very honest, unfortunately, but he figured out a few things and that led things going. Then interestingly,
so one thing are like tradable tokens that
yes,
real world assets, so
yes,
to say.
And decentralized peer-to-peer exchanges. That's also what he pioneered.
And also like darknet, let's say forums.
Exactly,
right?
exactly.
Kind of.
What later the Silk Road would become. That there was already at the core emerging. And then interestingly, his son, who led this laissez-faire City Times, which was the newsletter more or less of the project, he later on became one of the first entrepreneurs providing ASICs for Bitcoin mining. So it was also very early, because in between the people looking for digital money, also James Dale Davidson thought it would be first something linked to gold or precious metals. And that's when in 99 e-gold appeared. So that was inspired by first from the side of the cypherpunks, I'd say, even though it was not really a cryptographic project, but mostly from these efforts to have decentralized.
By e-gold was Chow? Was it Chow? David Chow?
No. E-gold is Dr. Jackson. Chow is the DigiCash project.
DigiCash, yeah.
That also happened. So also eCash was pioneered around these projects. That came out of this laissez-faire city
was 2001 or 9 now. It was before.
1999 it started. In 2007 it was shut down.
That's why you said you were in Bitcoin in 1990s.
Yes,
because
it's all predecessors. So I was in e-gold. I got to know a lot about the ecosystem, and then I realized what's the problem of e-gold is, of course, on the one side you have the Oracle problem. You have to trust that the gold is really stored somewhere. And Houston, the guy before who did a kind of e-silver, he defrauded the investors, so you can't be sure it's really there if you have like the token to it. Dr. Jackson was honest, so the gold was there, but the problem is the gold was at a central location, so when the US government shut it all down, it just confiscated everything, and that was another problem. That was the centralized structure of a provider, of something that's very innovative. And that was in 2007 a big learning experience that's something to avoid. So you've two things to avoid: the centralization, an Oracle problem, and the trust issue arising due to centralization and due to the problem of oracles. And that must have fostered a thinking, or may have had an influence on Satoshi Nakamoto, not only creating it, but then people like picking up on it, because it was first used among the libertarian-leaning people who were the first to get it, but those who had some prior experience with the digital tools, digital money schemes, digital forums, and so on.
But you were initially very pessimistic about Bitcoin.
Yes,
right?
I knew that laissez-faire city would fail from what I saw, how it behaved, and I knew that Bitcoin would fail, because I thought it was obvious in 2009. Bitcoin made a trade-off that was very difficult to understand at the time. It went against the cypherpunk ethos, which was privacy first. Yeah, you want to have crypto, it's encrypted, but Bitcoin went for a non-anonymous payment system. So there's very little encryption in Bitcoin actually, but it focused on another problem, and it's how can you have a decentralized entity and still cope with the trust issue, that they're like different ideas of truth and who's right, and how do you find a consensus among who is right. That's the crucial thing that Bitcoin solved. But of course I didn't get at the time that it would solve it. No one really thought it'll be like the end-all idea, that's the innovation. So it seemed like one of those many digital money projects that wasn't really good on cryptography, that wasn't as good as digital cash or e-cash, which is really private, that you pass on, and then had all these resource-wasting mining as something that's hard to get, why you would need that, how it would survive. So it didn't seem like it'd be likely to survive or catch on.
Yeah, but now you are a Bitcoin maximalist. You could say, like all your projects. I was amazed yesterday when you were talking about your company and the solutions you provide. I have the feeling you are extremely focused on Bitcoin, even if there is not really the technological basis for the solution in Bitcoin. You then prefer to go away from blockchain instead of going for Ethereum or whatever.
Yes.
So what changed your mind on
it's just I had enough time. For everyone, it's a gradual discovery process, and almost everyone who first approaches Bitcoin say, that's very difficult. So first, that's a no-go. It's difficult to understand. And then when you start trying to understand it,
I mean, you were in base solutions much earlier than most. I mean,
but still, I was no cryptographer. I have an engineering background, so I had an idea about code. But I asked cryptographers at the time, and they say, no, that's not a good solution, because it's really hard to understand that an innovation, has to not fail for a while, and then be a good fit for a need. And that you can't just say from the technological side, you can't even say from the economic side, it was even more difficult.
You know what Lindy effect is?
Yeah, of course.
So at the end, the Lindy effect convinced you, right?
And then another trade-off of Bitcoin is because it doesn't want to have the Oracle problem, it has no link to outside value. So it starts with a value of 0. And from the economic side, of course, I was skeptical there. Whereas Austrian Economics would say anything that has no link to real valuation by real people, it looks like a convention. It looks like something that we agree on, but that's not very stable.
Right, because actually Austrian Economics says money can come only, or a good that can become money has to be used before as a good that is tradable and has value, and then it can become a money. But it wasn't the case with Bitcoin.
Yeah, it's not exactly like that. It's that a commodity money has to emerge out of a commodity, and that's token money without a link with just a convention is just very unlikely.
Right.
It's unlikely to solve trust issues. So if you already trust another person, other people to have a convention, like let's agree what's the value of something, you don't really need money. Because money is for solving trust issues. Mm-hmm. I want to settle something, it should be final, and I want to cooperate with people that don't always share my values. So that's the challenge, and Bitcoin made the trade-off there, going without any kind of outside value. And that was hard to understand how that could work, and that it worked in the end. So from the technological and from the economic side, it was very reasonable to be skeptical. But if you're skeptical about something, unless you make a prediction. I'm going to say it's going to fail, and I'll tell you how I expect it to fail, and then I have to look at what happens really. So most academics never do that. They don't have no responsibility for being wrong.
Absolutely. So when more or less did you get you convinced of Bitcoin?
Oh, it was very gradual. It's a very gradual discovery because always something new emerges and you make a new prediction. I was very early into the Silk Road thing, so I also discovered it very early because it was within the same pattern of problems, decentralized exchanges, black markets, more or less, and so that didn't increase my conviction in Bitcoin. I thought it's very crazy to go for illegal products because then the likelihood of it being a regulated asset one day, it's even lower. And I think that's also what Satoshi Nakamoto thought at the time, that it's not a good idea to attract bad attention. So he advised the WikiLeaks project to not use Bitcoin. WikiLeaks, which is, of course, very controversial, but much less so than Silk Road.
Absolutely.
But I understood something else, that it had a non-zero value. With Silk Road, it was clear the first time, okay, the value is not zero, because the prices on Silk Road were 50% below street market prices for trucks.
Okay.
So there you could figure out, okay, you only need to get that kind of digital currency. Of course, no one is going to hold onto it, but it's a reason to buy it and pay something for it. You don't know what's the price, right? But it's above zero. Okay? So that was the first time I still thought, okay, now it's even more sure that it's going to fail from other attack vectors, mostly the political side. But so gradually, with many users, and it'll be a long story about that gradual discovery, because I really want to understand things. So I'm watching the world. I'm also an entrepreneur, so I got some reality feedback of how things work, and I think it's the only way to understand Bitcoin is to go through the discovery process. And if you're late, you have the luxury of, I mean, most people they come up with a first idea and say, oh, it's not going to work because. But then it's like, hey, we are not in 2009. It's like 15 years. And then I have to figure out, okay, it's a good argument. Let's look at it. How would you have predicted it to evolve? What happened? And I think if you're a bit humble, and not most people approach Bitcoin, and they are so sure that it's not working, that they'll explain you how to fix it and stuff like that. And I think the right approach to reality, and it's also the approach of Austrian Economics, is to really care about what's really happening, not what's in your mind, what you like it to be, what's really happening, learning from reality, and then revising, of course, the predictions.
Somehow verify your thesis with the reality. But at the end, you are Bitcoin maximalist. So, what are your arguments?
I would say I'm a Bitcoin minimalist.
Minimalist. Why?
It's like looking back over 15 years, what has worked. And Bitcoin has worked for 15 years as a savings technology. If you did it right, like not being cyclical, but use it like an index ETF, then volatility is not that much of a problem if you do dollar cost averaging, and volatility to the upside is great for your portfolio. So as a savings technology, it has not failed for 15 years, and that's something so new and unlikely to succeed. That's quite something, and that's the learning process for people that have been for enough time in it. It's not so sure yet if it solves other problems as well.
Especially that I think most people overestimate the durability of an average, let's say, fiat currency. If you ignore, let's say, not go for dollar, but the other currencies, it's like the average lifetime of a currency is certainly below 50 years, right?
Yes.
So with Bitcoin, 15 years, you are let's say 30% of the road at least, right? You know what I mean? I mean, at least 30% of the success of an average fiat currency, right?
Well, let me give you an example. If you entered Bitcoin at the worst possible time, it was at $69,000. Because we are cyclical, so we're only interested in something if everyone is saying, oh, you missed it. And you started investing in Bitcoin at the top, but you did it with dollar cost averaging, and you held until today, you would have performed better than any other asset. Okay, that's hard to understand for most people how that can be with such a volatile risk asset, but for the dollar cost average, it's a low risk asset.
Okay.
It has been so far. We cannot extrapolate. But the original expectation of a thing that's, with the old assets is like we buy what everyone else is buying. That's happening with the index ETF. It's literally that. You buy the stocks that everyone else is buying. That usually gives you that kind of behavior. So if you're lucky, good timing, But if something goes up gradually, and that's the stock market has been doing it to the monetary policy because the money supply has gone up, so then it's a question how long do you have to constantly have time in the market? Because time in the market then always beats timing the market. Okay. For things that have volatility, even have strong volatility, the important thing is what are the risk of you taking it all out at the wrong time, and how much is the drawdown, so that is sharp ratio kind of thing. And Bitcoin has been working for 15 years better than the most conservative asset is the index ETF. But for now, even if it seems crazy, it's the most conservative, which means for a long term working consistently as an investment strategy or saving strategy. Let's call it a saving strategy. And so Bitcoin is already there. So there's like something you can discover and you can figure out, and it's a reality check. You can check in reality, was it just really true what he's saying? So I'm not chilling Bitcoin as you gotta buy it now. It's currently in a bear market. But if you figure out what it is and what it has been doing well, I think it has turned into a very conservative asset. So I'm a very conservative and very skeptical person. I'm not easy to fool. I don't fall for hypes. I don't care about what other people are doing. I want to see what survives, and then maybe I'll try it out. But I want to understand even the crazy new things.
So is it the durability of Bitcoin, like the track record, 15-year history? Is that exactly the reason why in your company you go only for solutions that your company is connected to blockchain or to crypto, that you apply only solutions that are based on Bitcoin, that you don't go into Ethereum and stuff, other blockchains?
Oh, that's another learning. Of course, I was into Ethereum and all kinds of crypto promises. That's just you have predictions. You think, okay, what will it have? What will it bring about? What will it solve? And what's the trade-off? And I learned that blockchain usually is not a good solution. Because the trade-off is not right. It's a very expensive, inefficient kind of ledger, which is just a data bank.
Right.
So you need to have really good reasons for it to be employed. And then we can learn, okay, what kind of projects have been employed, what's the long-term value of these projects, but what was it really a solution? And nothing has reached that level of where you can say, okay, it's a conservative, proven tech stack. It's all explorative. You have hypes in some use cases.
This isn't technology that you can really, let's say, deploy ripe solutions, right? Yes. Market ripe solutions.
Yeah, still all the stage of figuring it out. And we also learn about the trade-offs. We learned that most things, they claim they use blockchain because they want a decentralized solution, are very centralized venture companies who do a lot of pump and dump schemes, and it's all like they're using even the Amazon Web Services and stuff like that, just because it's a venture project, but it has a kind of Ponzi-like problem to it. If it's the only cash flow you get is from retail investors offering you your Bitcoin to get your token, but never really a serious sustainable cash flow out of a problem that you solve, then it's a red flag. I'm not saying they are all scammers. I'm just saying it has not reached the level of maturity yet. And we have learned of many things trying out for what is it a solution. So I have a project that does a blockchain and works on blockchain, but of course I try to minimize the aspect it needs blockchain because it's a trade-off.
Exactly. So let's shill a little bit your company.
You're mentioning just one project, which is a small one. I'm an economist and investor. I have many projects. That one project is figuring out decentralized tech for innovative jurisdictions. But it's a quite early company.
But let's explain it to the viewers. Decentralized tech for jurisdictions, meaning independent jurisdictions, meaning what kind of services will it offer?
So people can what do jurisdictions need? Usually they have like base technology, a kind of land registry ledger, which like who is using what of a plot. Then they have a kind of company registry, like who is having shares in what entities are there in the jurisdiction. And then there's a kind of communication, like you want to have citizens communicate, you want to have authorities or jurisdictions communicate. So those things, I'd say, information, land usage rights, and company shares, cooperation.
Okay, like court files or kind of this, like registry of court cases, stuff like that.
Not yet, because innovative jurisdiction tries to figure out you're not starting with courts already in the way that you figure out how can you solve conflicts and how can you avoid conflicts. So it's rather at this stage yet we see that if you don't have a monopoly provider of courts, it's more or less a lot of it's mediation. Okay, so you want to have, and of course that's part of the company thing, is like have mediation systems. to deal with that. And there, of course, you need to keep track of our people keeping their promises. That's the first thing is really keeping track.
But I think countries like the traditional countries, they employ some systems. They have registries, and they are electronic registries in most cases. So they employ existing systems already. There are solutions for that.
They have different trade-offs now.
So how is it different from your solution? I mean, what's special about your solution?
Even within the jurisdiction is not censorable by the jurisdiction. And even being with one location is not a centralized solution, it's not a top-down solution, it's not a smart city surveillance thing, which it usually turns out to be. One monopoly provider has all the information, and he got to decide unilaterally, even if there's a conflict. If you have a conflict with the provider, he is running the courts and deciding on these cases, and he can just change things afterwards. So what we learned from, and that was the original idea of the cypherpunks, how can we use technology for more decentralized ways of living together? And we have learned some things in Bitcoin that have worked, so it makes sense to build on that. But we have to figure out how can we now offer more solutions that offer decentralized ways. One thing is censorship resistance. The other thing is being decentralized and not have one centralized admin. So it needs cryptography as an element. You have this kind of public-private key as authorization thing. You have key sharing, and it's a lot of primitives that we can take over and use from what we've learned from cryptography and crypto projects over the years.
Is it more of a peer-to-peer solution, or is
it?
Yeah, okay.
Of course, decentralization always means it's more peer-to-peer. It's not top-down. It's peer-to-peer. You've got to find an agreement with someone who's on the same level. He's not privileged. So you figure out if there's a win-win way to figure out how to deal with conflicts. A lot of conflicts arise out of unclear usage rights. We have a plot, but there's a neighbor and he has a conflicting idea what we should do with the plot. And now it's top-down. It's like, do you have the permit to do that or not? And the permits can change and the laws can change. Can we bring it down to a peer-to-peer win-win solution? Because if we have win-win solutions, we have much more possibility for value upside. It's like getting a good solution.
So it's not only a technical problem, it's something of a conceptual problem as well.
Yes,
right?
yes.
Okay, great. Rahim, thank you for your knowledge, for all the insights. I mean, for the exciting, history of Bitcoin, the social history of Bitcoin. I haven't heard that kind of, that side of history before. Usually, you read or you learn about the technical history of Bitcoin. But there is much more to that. I mean, the social, of course, the cypherpunk movement you hear also, but that the convergence of, let's say, the libertarian ideas, the free city ideas, that actually some of the actors came from that movement. I haven't heard of that, and thank you for these insights. It's always a pleasure to listen to your presentations. You are so innovative, with your vast knowledge. Thanks so much, and I wish you viewers a fantastic day. Let's do something extraordinary today.